So, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Shri Ganeshaya Namah, Om Saraswate Namah, Om Guruve Namah. So, today the topic that I have here is around Karakas, the significators in the chart, and also Maran Karaka sthaan, which we call MKS, because both of them are very clearly related. The Maran Karaka term has been originated from Karaka itself. So, I'm going to take you through a number of things here. See, most of you are, basic to advanced level, knowledge bearers here today. So I am going to take you through some very important subjects, some very important, insightful information, some deep secrets. You would definitely know who's the Karaka for which house. But here we will focus a lot on the reasoning part. We will also focus a lot on the connection between the Karakas and the significator, the kinds of significators that are there, and primarily we'll look at some example charts as well. And I'll also try and throw some light on certain remedies in terms of what we can do. Okay. So the concept of Karaka, which is the significator. So where has this, arrived from? So this comes from the word which is kara. Kara means to do. So Karaka plays a very important role in Vedic astrology in our charts because this is a planet which will help us do the task that we were to do. So, for example, if it is about relationship, if it is about marriage, if it is about spouse, of course, the seventh house matters, the seventh lord matters, but there Venus becomes the Karaka for the female spouse. So, in terms of getting things done, Venus plays a very important role. For male spouse, Jupiter becomes the significator or the Karaka. So that planet plays a role. Our basic vitality, immunity is seen from the Lagna, ascendant, or the ascendant Lord, or planets in the first house. But here, Sun, who is the natural significator of the first house, plays a very important role in terms of further assessing whether the steps that we will take in order to improve the significations, whether we will be successful or not, it depends on this particular planet. So it plays a very important role in all aspects, from predictions point of view, timing of events, and the kind of support that we get. And therefore, they become most important to understand in Vedic Jyotish. This definitely holds sometimes even a greater importance than the sign lord or the planets that are placed there. Okay. So, firstly, we just need to learn a few important terms, all right, in terms of different types of karakas that are there. So, of course, if I talk about all of these karakas, I can probably do a 2-day class in it. But the first one is called Nitya Karak. So, this is the term from traditional Jyotish. Okay. Nitya Karaka is the Naisargic Karaka or the primary significator. And today we are going to be focusing a lot on the primary significator, right? The planets that signify all the 12 houses. Then there is Anitya Karaka. Anitya Karaka is the term used for the dispositor. So, for example, if you have a Jupiter placed in the sign of Gemini, okay, which is based on the current transit, then the Anitya Karaka in that case becomes Mercury, which is the ruler of the sign Gemini. So, of course, that planet also plays a very important role in terms of ensuring from a remedial point of view and certain predictions as well. But we will not touch upon Anitya Karaka today, but this is just from a knowledge point of view that I'd like to share with you. Then there is a signification of a planet called Karyesha, which is very much linked to different divisional charts. So we have the natal chart, there is Navamsha, which is the chart of fortune, Bhagya. There is Navamsha is also the chart of marriage, spouse. So Venus becomes the Karyesha in that case if you were to link Navamsha. The Shamsha, which is the D10 chart, which is the chart of our profession, Mercury becomes the Karyesha in that case. So this is also a concept of Karaka. So, and in general sense, we could say relationships. Of course, Venus plays a very important role. Work, which requires a lot of learning, Mercury plays a very important role. And then we have Chara Karakas as well, based on the Gemini system. Chara Karakas are based on the degree from the highest degree planet till the lowest degree planet. Some school of thoughts take 7 planets as these Chara Karakas from the highest degree, which is the Atma Karaka, to the lowest degree, which is the Dara Karaka. And some school of thoughts take eight Karakas. So, I mean, I follow the school of thinking of seven Karakas because I do not include Rahu. But yes, some school of thoughts do indicate that Rahu is also amongst the Karakas. But this is a very deep concept. So, today we are going to be focusing a lot on this particular Karaka, which is the Nitya Karaka or the primary significator. A Karaka is like a project manager, right? You have a project to deliver, and of course, who will ensure management of this project from end to end, from the very initial planning stage till the execution state, ensuring that the quality is there, ensuring that all the others who are involved in this particular task or project is worked in of course your favor. So it is like a modern day project manager to probably give you a very simple link or indication. And Karakas are the ones who lead to Maran Karaka and the kind of position. So this is more or less an introduction that I'd like to share here with regards to Karaka. Now, if we move forward to the Naisargic Karaka scheme or the significators, the primary house Karakas. Okay, so here I have this chart which marks first house as Sun. So we have the planets here who are the primary Karakas of all these houses. Surya is the Karaka for Lagna. Now, why is Sun the Karaka for Lagna? Because it is associated with our intelligence. Lagna or ascendant or the first house is associated with name and fame, with recognition, with reputation, with good health. Sun is the initiator of all kinds of Raj Yoga or king-like success in the chart. And it is also the primary giver of health. It is the giver of life. So therefore, no other planet than the king of the planetary cabinet can be the significator of the first house. And of course, if Sun is naturally placed in this house, it is an excellent placement. It is a very good placement because he is the one that signifies Lagna. All the other planets are part of the cabinet, where you have a minister, you have a student, you have a commander, you have a relationship builder, and of course, all of these play a very important role. You have a labor as well, which is Saturn. So, of course, but Sun is the king, and of course, there could be no other planet that could signify the first house. Some of the other houses have secondary karakas as well. There are more than one planet that signify or are linked to that particular house. But for the first house, it is only and only Sun that is the seat of the king. Second house has been given the significator as Jupiter. So Jupiter signifies the second house because second house is the house of food. It is the house of family. It is the house of your speech. And Jupiter plays a very important role in speech, in terms of Vak. Jupiter is also the natural uh, giver of wealth. Now, wealth in the olden days. How did we see wealth in the olden days? Wealth in the olden days were seen by certain animals. In Vedic terms, we used to call it Pashu wealth. Okay, so based on the number of cattle someone owns, or horses, or elephants, based on that, it was determined how wealthy you are. And the real wealth that is determined by Jupiter is the wealth of knowledge. But of course, he is the giver of wealth, he is the giver of speech, and of course, the real wealth as well. Therefore, from an ancient Jyotish terms, when it comes to family, wealth, food, Jupiter becomes the primary significator of the second house. The third house, which is the house of valor. No other planet but Mars or Mangal can be the significator because this is the house of your drive. Mars has got a killer instinct. It is the house of Parakram, which we call valor. See, in matters of war, in matters of conflict, third house and sixth house plays a very important role. So therefore, there could be no other planet than the commander in chief, that is Mars. Mars is like a commander in Surya's planetary cabinet. So if Sun will ask Mars to go on war, he is always ready. Now, this house also becomes a very important house for entrepreneurs, right? Because for entrepreneurial ventures to do your own work, you need to have that killer instinct. You need to have that drive. So, therefore, Mars becomes a very important planet here in terms of ensuring that it is the significator of the third house, and third house is also the house of siblings. And Mars does represent sibling, and I'll explain it to you through a sample chart as well later. Moon, there is no other planet but Moon who can become the primary significator of the fourth house. Though there are other significators as well of the fourth house, which I will share with you, because Moon does not have any conflict. If you look at the planetary cabinet, Moon is neutral or friendly towards all other grahas. It does not hold any enmity. So Moon does not have any kind of conflict. And this is the house of compassion, the house of mother, home environment, nurturing. And therefore, Moon becomes the primary significator of the fourth house. Now, there are other planets also which are the significator of the fourth house. There is Venus, because Venus signifies vehicles. So Venus also becomes the significator of the fourth house from a vehicle's point of view. Mars is also one of the significators of the fourth house because Mars signifies land or bhumi, as we say in the Vedic terms. So Mars also becomes the significator of the fourth house. And there is another planet, that is Saturn, and Saturn signifies construction on a land. So, therefore, for that matter, Saturn also somewhat becomes the significator of the fourth house. So, one house also has multiple significators, but Moon becomes the primary significator. Now, Jupiter is also the significator of the fifth house, which is the house of future, the house of children. And the reason why Jupiter has been given the signification of this house is because it plays a very important role, and I'll connect it with astrology, with Jyotish. To become a Jyotish, and most importantly, to make predictions. I said it in my previous class as well, and I often say it in my video as well, that anyone can learn astrology, can learn Jyotish, but you can only predict if you have a strong fifth house or you have a strong influence of Jupiter because he is the one that governs predictions when it comes to future. So it is a very important house for astrologers, and Jupiter becomes a very important planet and the Karaka, primary Karaka for all astrological knowledge and future predictions. And he is also associated to children. Therefore, there cannot be any other Karaka or the significator of this house. Saturn. Now, Saturn has been given three houses, which is the sixth, eighth, and the 12th, the perceived bad houses or dusthanas in Vedic astrology. These houses are the domain of Shani. Primarily, sixth house is the domain of Shani. Sixth house is seva, service, and there is no other hard worker or someone who has the power of labor than Shani, than Saturn. And it is very constant. We get perfection with constant practice, and constant practice only comes with the power of labor. We also see health and well being, rog, rin, ripu, diseases from the sixth house, somewhat, sixth, also the eighth house. So, Saturn is the primary planet that is the giver of diseases, ill health. So, therefore, it is the significator of the sixth house, and no other planet can be the significator of the sixth house. Venus becomes the significator of the seventh house, primary significator. Now, here I would also say that since Jupiter represents male spouse, Venus represents female spouse, primary significator will always be Jupiter because this house is not only the house of spouse, marriage. This is the house of all those people who are opposite to you, your attitude towards the outer world of people, things, and events. Venus is the planet of interaction between you and I, all of us, and of course with other beings as well. So interaction between one and the second being is governed by Venus. And Venus also plays a very important role in financial matters when it comes to business related finances. This is the natural house where goddess Lakshmi sits, which is the sign of Libra. This is the spirit. The seventh house is the spirit that you carry. And the spirit that we carry is seen from Venus because this spirit helps us build relationship between two people. So Venus is the primary significator of the seventh house. Saturn is the significator of the eighth house. So once again, one of the other perceived bad house, which is a Dusthana, becomes the domain of Shani here. This is the house of transformation. This is the house of diseases once again, your weaknesses. And Saturn is a master when it comes to giving diseases, when it comes to giving pain, sorrow. And these are all the domains of Shani. Of course, it has some good domains as well in terms of giving the power of labor. But in order to transform, we all need that power of labor. And therefore, Saturn also becomes the Ayush Karak, or the one that rules longevity. Now, Jupiter also becomes the significator of the ninth house. Interestingly, if you will see that Saturn is a significator of three of the 12 houses, Jupiter is a significator of four of the 12 houses. There is a reason for it, and I will clarify that a bit later in the next few minutes. But this house is the primary house of dharma, fortune. We also see wealth from this house. See, wealth are seen from all the houses where Jupiter is the significator. Second house, fifth house, ninth house, and the 11th house. Ninth house is the house of Dharma, fortune. It is the wealth bhava. It is Purva Punya. It is the house of your past, your lineage. Sun becomes the secondary significator or karaka of the ninth house because sun represents religion, sun represents lineage and also father. Ninth house is also the house of guru, and of course Jupiter plays a very important role. See, ninth house is a house in the chart. It is like a prepaid card, right? So if you're born with a strong ninth house and ninth lord, right, and a strong navamsha, you're born with a prepaid card, right? Otherwise, if it's weak, then there's a debit note, or probably you have some debts to pay, which could already, fructify there. But this is like a house where either you probably are coming with traveler's check or probably prepaid card that is already loaded with money. So therefore, Jupiter becomes the primary significator of the ninth house. Mercury is the primary significator of the 10th house, and there are other planets also who are the primary significators of the 10th house. Why Mercury is the primary significator of the 10th house? Now, this is the house of profession, your work, job. To do any kind of job, any kind of profession, any kind of work, the first thing that we need to do is learn. And Mercury is the one that signifies learning. Therefore, it becomes the primary significator of the 10th house just because of this reason. To work, you need to become a student first, you need to learn. And Mercury also represents management, it represents intellect. Sun is also one of the significators of the 10th house. It represents start of a new work. It represents authority, leadership. Jupiter is also the significator of the 10th house because it represents knowledge or wisdom at work. Saturn is also the significator of the 10th house because it represents hard work or labor at work. Venus is also the significator of the 10th house because it represents our relationship with other people. And lastly, Moon is also one of the significators of the 10th house because it represents sustenance at work. So 10th house, why it becomes so important? Because it has so many different significators. But the primary significator is Mercury. All right, so this is about the 10th house. Now, 11th house, which is the Labhasthan, the house of gains. Here, Jupiter again becomes the significator of the 11th house, and it is again holding a great disposition because here we see positivity. Now, one of the aspects here is that 11th house is somewhat connected to the ninth house. So, ninth house is the natural sign of Sagittarius, which is this house ruled by Jupiter. Now, how well your communication will be with your guru is seen from the 11th house because this is three houses away from the ninth house, which means message of the guru and your communication with the guru, your connect with the guru. You can only have a good connect with the guru if there are positivity or probably positive planets or benefic influence on the 11th house, or if 11th lord is under some benefic influence. Otherwise, it could indicate positive as well as negative matters related to guru. So this is one of the major reasons why Jupiter has been given the job for being the significator of the 11th house. And the second reason, since it is the house of wealth, material gains, so Jupiter is the primary significator of wealth. Saturn becomes the significator of the 12th house of expenditure. sleep, the bed. Most importantly, moksha. Saturn is the one that plays a very important role in reaching towards moksha. So when we reach moksha, in Vedic terms, we say that, okay, we are going to heaven or Svargaloka. Now, before going to Svargaloka, there is a loka which is called Tapaloka that is ruled by Saturn. So that comes first, where there is some penance that needs to be done, and then, of course, we reach the eternal, state of moksha, which again is ruled by Saturn. Now, this is in simple terms, sort of summarizing the Karakas or the primary significators of each house. Now, some interesting facts that I'd like to share with you here. So, firstly, as I said, that Jupiter is the significator of 1, 2, 3, and 4 houses. Saturn is the significator of 3 houses. Jupiter and Saturn both are outer planets. So, if you see, besides the Kendra houses, these are the Kendra houses: first house, fourth house, seventh house, and the 10th house. These are quadrant houses. Now, Sun, Moon, Venus, and Mercury. Sun and Moon are luminaries. So they have been given the Karakatva of the first house and the fourth house. Venus and Mercury are inner planets, right? They're not exterior planets. The exterior planets in this case becomes Mars, becomes Jupiter, becomes Saturn. So all of these planets, therefore, for that reason, have been given the significator. So this is the outer and the inner circle. So everything in Jyotish and astrology is always there for a reason. Sometimes it is very logical, sometimes it is very easy to understand. Jupiter and Saturn being the biggest grahas of them all. The farthest and the biggest, Jupiter being the biggest, has been given the Karakatva of 4 of these 12 houses, Saturn being the second, of course, in the planetary cabinet, has been given the Karakatva of 3 of these houses, and Mars therefore becomes the Karaka of the third house. So this is, in a very simple terms. Perhaps you will not find this knowledge anywhere, but this really helps connect the dots and uncovers why. And in Jyotish, we must be inquisitive and always questioning why. There will be always multiple things that you would probably come across. Now, our next topic is very closely related to Karaka or the significator, and that is understanding Maran Karaka sthaan or MKS. See, to understand Maran Karaka sthaan, firstly, we need to understand what Marana means. See, Marana means dying, decay. Something is coming to an end. Okay. The planet is not very happy. And when we say Maran Karaka, so death of signification, what is dying here? Everything is not dying. What is dying is the signification, because there is some sort of cause, there is some sort of curse. It is linked to the past life, and I will explain it to you in this session today as well. It is death, to die, decay, or gradually moving towards the space of non existence of the body. It is only and only seen through Lagna or the ascendant. I repeat, Karakas and Maran Karakas are only to be seen from the Lagna, not from the moon, not from the sun. Okay. And their natural significations is going to die. Everything is not going to die. They are still going to be giving the results based on their lordship, based on the other connections that they are making. And of course, displacement is due to the fact that there were certain things related to the past life where the planet now is feeling offended. It feels offended, and therefore it is in a Marana position here. Now, if we start with the first house, where Saturn attains Maran Karaka, or it is a death like position for Saturn, the first house is vitality, immunity. Saturn is the giver of diseases. Saturn's pace is the slowest. We call it Manduka Gati, right? It is the giver of diseases, bad health. Lagna is all about good health. Lagna is all about immunity. Lagna is all about name, fame, recognition. It is about power. It is about authority, where Saturn, it is not his domain. So he feels very weak in this house, unless Saturn is in a friendly sign, or probably it is exalted, or certain exceptions which are there. Otherwise, it feels very weak in this house. So there is no other planet that can go Maran Karak than Saturn. Okay. There are, of course, few other things as well. Saturn gains directional strength in this house. In this house, it is losing direction. So that also further weakens Saturn in the placement of the ascendant. Ketu is the planet that goes Maran Karaka in the second house, because second house is the house of family and finance. Ketu is like a monk. Okay. So what it wants to do, it wants to destroy money. It wants to, of course, Ketu's placement is not very good when it comes to financial matters in the second house. It also somewhat affects speech. Ketu does not have any speech, right? It is the body. So if it's the body, why will it have speech? It does not have anything to do with family or family matters or finances as well. And of course, such placement can definitely cause some defect to the speech, or such people could be very, quick speakers, very fast speakers, or probably their pace is quite, other people might find it very hard to understand or relate to it. Jupiter attains Maran Karaka position in the third house. Ketu attains MKS in the second house. Jupiter attains Maran Karaka position in the third house. Third house is the house of sexuality. Okay. Now, seventh house is the house of marriage. This house is 9 houses away. So it represents dharma of marriage. Jupiter rules dharma, but this represents dharma of marriage. All right. And this house is the house of desire. I mentioned to you in the very beginning that this is the house of war. And Jupiter does not have anything to do with war. It is not a planet that could pick up a gun and start fighting. It would rather pick up book and start giving upadesha. So it feels very uncomfortable, because the house that is full of desires, Jupiter is not very comfortable here. See, it is a situation where, this is the domain of Rahu. Rahu gets exalted in the natural sign of Gemini, right, which is the third house. It is his domain. And Jupiter is like that person who's a teetotaler, and you take him to a club or a pub, and of course, he feels very uncomfortable there, not at ease, and he wants to probably move away. This is the domain where Rahu loves. Rahu excels in such situations, but Jupiter feels very uncomfortable in these situations. There are two planets that get Maran Karaka position in the fourth house, or a weak position: Mercury and Ketu, right? Mercury, for the fact that Mercury is a prince. He is the child. Fourth house is the house of primary education. It is the house of schooling. It is the house of compassion. This is where moon excels. And Mercury doesn't like the moon. There is a rich history towards it. Mercury does not like the moon at all. Mercury is like that child who does not like to stay indoors. You can relate it to your childhood. When we were children, we would rather like to stay out, right? In terms of going out and playing. So, home environment is something where it is not very comfortable. And the initial school learning as well. It is something that we realize later, most of the time, when we realize that there is good value here. And of course, Ketu is also a planet that feels very uncomfortable or weak. Some school of thoughts indicate that Ketu is also Maran Karaka in the fourth house, but I believe that it is more applicable in the second house. But yes, we would respect other schools of thought as well, which indicate that Ketu is MKS in the fourth house. It's its weak position. Venus becomes Maran Karaka, or it's a death-like position in the sixth house. Sixth house is the house of celibacy. Venus represents sexuality. Sixth house is the natural sign of Virgo, that represents virginity, because it is very well linked to Virgin Mary. And Venus is the god of sexuality, so therefore it feels very uncomfortable. Though, there are a lot of questions which are raised. Why Venus in Virgo is debilitated, and also in sixth house it is MKS, it is best friends with Mercury. This is the reason. It is related to the signification. See, I will explain it to you, of course, in a much more simple manner to probably relate, why they feel so uncomfortable with these examples, because that becomes very simple for us. Therefore, Venus it's a weak position for Venus, because this is the house of celibacy. It is also the house of conflict. And this is where Venus doesn't feel comfortable here. Both the gurus, will not feel comfortable in the house of conflict, in the house of war. Mars is Maran Karaka or MKS in the seventh house, and so is Mercury. See, for Mars, this is the house of marriage. Mars is a brahmacharya graha. It is a bachelor graha, and so is Mercury. Last thing that Mars would want is to get married because he would probably be holding a knife or a gun. And he would probably say, okay, what is there for me to get married? So therefore, because of its killer instinct, because of it holding a sword or a gun, it feels very uncomfortable in this house. So does Mercury because he is a childlike planet. So therefore, it does not feel at ease when it comes to matters pertaining to marriage or with other people. Therefore, they're both MKS in the seventh house, or it's a weak position. Moon gains Maran Karaka in the house where it is a domain of Saturn. It is the domain of Shani. See, Moon is the giver of comforts, rejuvenation. Eighth house is the giver of uncomfortable situation, sudden situation. It is the giver of diseases. Moon has a lot of compassion. So it cannot deal with these sudden things and sudden shifts, right? Particularly, it becomes very difficult at the mental level. Therefore, it is a weak disposition for Moon that it goes Maran Karaka in the eighth house. Rahu goes Maran Karaka in the ninth house. It is interestingly reverse of Jupiter. If you see here, Jupiter is MKS here and Rahu is MKS here. So they are working in reverse because ninth house is the house of temples. It is the house of prayers, worship, right? So why would Rahu feel comfortable in this house? I mean, for him, it has nothing to do with his belief system. He does not believe in dharma, he does not believe in worship or prayers. So therefore, it feels uncomfortable or it is a Maran Karaka position in the ninth house. And Sun finally goes Maran Karaka or a death-like position in the 12th house. So this is where it is again the domain of Saturn, the domain of Shani, and Surya is the king. First house is yourself. Sun doesn't like to borrow. King doesn't like to, sleep for long hours. This is the house of ego. All right. This is where you're losing your ego. So it is an absolutely uncomfortable position. He is the king. He wants to administer. He has no time for moksha. He has no time for spiritual knowledge, or spirituality is not his domain. Therefore, he feels very uncomfortable in the 12th house. Now, a few facts before we move forward to the next slide and what I have to share with you. Maran Karaka, what does it actually mean? This means that the planet has no domain knowledge of that particular house. He or she is missing the domain knowledge of that house. Saturn does not have the domain knowledge of the first house. Ketu does not have the domain knowledge of the second house. Jupiter does not have the third house. Mars does not have the seventh house. Venus does not have the sixth house. Sun does not have the 12th house. Rahu does not have the ninth house. And Moon does not have the domain knowledge of the eighth house. It is very simple as you ask a person working in finance to take up an IT job, to start working on technical troubleshooting. He has no domain knowledge and he'll feel very uncomfortable there, right? Similarly, someone working in IT, you start asking this person, okay, tomorrow you'll start managing human resources. You have no domain knowledge there. So how would you feel, at ease with regards to matters of these houses? So in order to understand Maran Karaka, we must understand the MKS grahas and also the Karakas for that house. It is very much related and their relationship. So, for example, Sun and Saturn, they share a very difficult relationship here. Therefore, when Sun and Saturn are always conjoined in a chart or they're in a sambandha, it does make a difficult situation from its signification point of view. Of course, it does, matter a lot in terms of its position, in terms of, certain matters related to, their lordship and other factors. But generally, it is considered a difficult position when it comes to authority matters. Okay, Venus and Sun, if we take a relation here, Venus and Saturn, if we take a relationship here, it is said that Saturn and Venus time periods, Saturn Dasha, Venus Antardasha, and Venus Dasha, Saturn Antardasha, could perhaps be the most difficult periods of one's life. Or rather, if not difficult, this could perhaps be the most unpredictable phase of life, wherein sometimes you will not be able to be in a position in terms of what is happening, right? So, this is very unpredictable. Jupiter goes Maran Karaka in the third, where Mars is the significator. So, someone born with a very strong influence of Mars. So, for example, someone born on the 11th day of the waxing or the waning moon, Ekadashi Tithi, which is ruled by Mars. Naturally, on those days, if someone is born, Jupiter is already going a little bit weak in their chart, right? Rahu and Jupiter again share a same relationship. Now, Rahu's dasha and Jupiter's antardasha would still be a little bit better compared to Jupiter dasha and Rahu's antardasha, which could be quite problematic. But of course, it will depend on a lot of other factors as well. So this is also, helpful in terms of further understanding and assessing their relationship in many different ways. Okay, so this is again a lot about Maran Karaka. Now, planets attain Maran Karaka in certain houses from the Lagna. I'm again repeating, it is always from the Lagna, from the ascendant. Sun, Moon are Maran Karaka of the 12th and 8th houses, or we call it Dusthana houses. They are uncomfortable in Saturn's domain. They are the luminaries. So it is also very much linked to past life, and I'm going to explain it to you very soon. Jupiter and Venus are Maran Karaka in the third and the sixth house, says which is the house of conflict. These are gurus. Jupiter is Brihaspati, Devaguru. Venus is Daitya Guru. And both of these gurus, they have nothing to do with conflict. They have a lot to do with teachings, and they feel uncomfortable in these houses. Mars and Mercury are MKS in seventh house because these are bachelor grahas. They marriage is not their domain. Relationship could be, but marriage definitely is not their domain. Mars, Saturn, and Ketu are Maran Karaka in Kendra houses, in quadrant houses. If you probably have a reference from the previous slide, and of course this slide as well. So that also plays an important role because Mars, Saturn, Ketu, all three are malefic planets. So therefore, they go MKS in quadrant houses, which are the pillars of life. And Rahu is MKS in ninth house, which is the Purva Punya, the house that is linked to past, past life, deeds or accumulations of our karmas from past. And this house itself is very important to understand why. Another perspective. If Sun is Maran Karaka in the 12th house, why? If Moon is Maran Karaka in the 8th house, why? It is very much linked to the past life. Now, what I'd like to do here, and of course, you will only understand when you watch this section two, three, four times. You might not be able to understand or relate it at the first go, but you might have to repeat it. So, of course, for that, I'm going to give you the recording. So, let's understand this from another perspective. Now, if I make ninth house as the ascendant or the lagna, and there is Rahu there. So this is not the first house. What I have taken, I have made ninth house as the ascendant, and we will read it from there. So this becomes the house of Purva Punya. All right, and we will read Maran Karaka position from there. So Sun is placed in the fourth house now from this house. Sun gains directional strength in this house. This house, Sun is losing direction. In 10th house, Sun gains directional strength. It is losing direction. All right. Let's look at Jupiter. Jupiter in Kendras. From here, Jupiter gains directional strength in the first house. So I made ninth house the Lagna. Jupiter gains directional strength in the first house. In this house, it is losing direction. It is zero Digbali. All right. So this again becomes a weak position for Jupiter. Venus gains directional strength or is Digbali in the fourth house. In 10th house, it is losing its direction. Rahu gains directional strength in the seventh house, and in the first house, it is losing direction. This is also the school of thought. But Sun, Jupiter, and Venus, for this reason, because it is linked to the past life, because due to certain karmas from the past, okay, which is linked to these planets, if it is Maran Karaka in the current chart. Why Sun goes Maran Karaka in the 12th house? Because from Purva Punya, it is in the house where it has zero direction. Jupiter from past life, it is in a house where it has zero direction. Venus from past life, it is in a house where it has zero direction. So therefore, these planets are Maran Karaka in these houses. Sun in the 12th house of the chart, Rahu in the ninth house of the chart, Jupiter in the third house, and Venus in the sixth house of the chart. So, of course, the reasons are again very much linked to some of these significations and these planets. So, we are examining these positions, making ninth house as the ascendant, and how we will examine these positions. So karmas of past life are seen from either ninth house, Navamsha, and the Shashtiamsha. To give you a couple of more examples, of course, I might not be able to, of course, cover all of these, but let's say Saturn, fifth house from the Purva Punya chart. This is the house of mantras. So if Saturn is in ascendant or Lagna, this means that there were certain curses related to mantras, related to prayers, related to inconsistencies with regards to that. And because of it, it is now in Marankaraka. Okay. For Sun, for example, it is a lot related to King. It is a lot related to our comfort space from the previous life, and therefore it is there. Mercury and Mars are Marankarak in the 11th from the, again, this is the past life chart, Purva Punya, past life chart. So if Mercury or Mars is in the seventh house, right? Now, one of the reason for it, why? Because this time the graha is not happy with something, right? It is not in a most comfortable position. It lacks the domain knowledge there. So this is a lot to do with certain experiences that we had with our friends in past life, where money was involved, where certain debts were involved. And of course, we were probably living with certain debts, and because of that, it is creating this kind of a position which is there. Mercury and Ketu, which is sixth from the past life connection. Eighth from the past life connection. So it is very well linked to again some of those hidden things or hidden aspects which were not known to us, and because of that, it is attaining a Marankaraka position in this life. So this is also another perspective which is clearly linked to Purva Punya or our past life and past deeds of why these planets attain Maran Karaka or they lack domain knowledge in certain houses. So this is also very important to understand, right, from that perspective. And of course, this section you will have to watch it maybe more than once in order to understand or clarify. Now, what house does the Maran Karaka planet damage? I will give you a very simple and golden tip. But before I give you this golden tip, is everything losing? No, everything is not losing here. The only piece which is losing is the natural signification of this planet that becomes challenging. But on the brighter side, what is happening? If there is a planet which is Maran Karaka, this also means that people associated to that planet will go out of the way to help you, to support you, to do anything for you. So, for example, if Sun is Maran Karaka in the 12th house, the father of the native goes out of the way to help. The father may suffer. Saturn's there in the first house. Your own power of labor. Of course, you will have to work very hard, but certain people who are helpers, laborers, they go out of the way to help you, support you. Jupiter in the third house, your guru or teacher, go out of the way to help you, to support you. Guru may suffer. Guru may have some, negative connotations here. Mars in the seventh house, spouse would really go out of the way. Spouse might suffer there, right? Or you might have an ardent follower, right? It is not always bad. So it has certain positive connotations as well. There is a suffering of other people that are involved, but of course, it does make your position pretty strong. Moon in Maran Karaka, mother may have certain suffering, but of course, it will be for your good, for your benefit. And Venus, of course, those who are you are in a relationship with again. So, your relationship, friends, and other people. And of course, they could suffer here. All those people who are opposite to you. And of course, it would include your spouse as well. So, this is what also signifies. Now, what house is being damaged here? Okay. So, for example, if let's say someone is Leo in the ascendant, all right, okay, and Jupiter is placed in the sign of Libra in the third house. So Jupiter is placed in an odd sign. So what is dying here? What is getting affected? Jupiter rules two signs, Sagittarius and Pisces. The even sign will get impacted, which is the sign of Pisces, which falls in this house. So this is the house or sign that will get impacted. It will not impact Sagittarius, where Jupiter is placed. So you can still expect a lot of positive results with regards to the fifth house matters. So another example, if let's say you are Virgo ascendant, okay? So let's say Virgo, number six, and Sun is in the 12th house. Though Sun is in Leo, all right, it is gaining some strength as well. But here, what house will get impacted? Sun only rules one house. So that house itself will get impacted regardless of its position in the odd sign or the even sign. All right. So this will only get impacted here. So let's take one more example. You are a Pisces ascendant. So what falls here? This is the sign of Libra. All right. So now Moon is placed in the odd sign. All right. So which house will get impacted here? The even sign. And Moon rules one sign only, that is the sign of Cancer. So that house or sign will get impacted here, regardless of whether it's odd or the even sign. So if a planet is in an odd sign, then the lordship of its even sign or the Rashi will get impacted. If the planet is in the even sign, that the odd sign rulership of this planet will get impacted besides its signification. So it's a very simple rule that we must remember. So let's look at some sample charts here. Firstly, we always start with Lord Ram's chart. Okay, Jai Shri Ram. And this is what we would start with in my previous class. Also, I started with Lord Ram's chart. Now, in his chart, Mars is Maran Karak in the seventh house. It is exalted as well, but that's a different thing, different story altogether. Okay, so where does it help and where it doesn't help, right? So we all are pretty, privy of the fact that he spent 14 years in exile. He was away from his spouse for those many years. And of course, the suffering that spouse also had to do, in order to, of course, cover that period and his exile, that was also there. So it is very clear, it is very evident. Mars in seventh house does not cause a breakage in marriage, right? It still gives a very strong, long-lasting marriage. But somehow, people who are associated, those who are there, they tend to suffer, and that could be spouse. So, of course, it brings certain inconsistencies or distance with regards to the spouse here. Now, also understand that Mars is the significator of younger siblings. All right. This is also another perspective to see. So his younger siblings, Lakshman, Bharat, Shatrughan, all of them would probably stand by his side, take his position. Particularly the younger sibling, that is Lakshman. He went into exile with him. So, of course, it gives you great support of siblings and, of course, your spouse as well. And most importantly, this is also where we see Lord Hanuman's role in his chart, who is the ardent follower or the ardent devotee of Lord Ram. So this particular placement also gives an ardent follower or an ardent devotee or someone who would look up to you. So you have great sense of responsibility. It is not always bad. There are positive implications as well. So some things are working, some things are not working. That is always the case for Maran Karak. Let's take a look at another example here. Okay. The second example I'd like to take here is of Mahatma Gandhi. So Mahatma Gandhi has sun or Surya in Maran Karak in the 12th house in the sign of Virgo. So what is happening? So firstly, understanding the Maran Karaka. He always used his father's name, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. So there is a sense of lineage, right? There is a sense of upbringing. There is a sense of distance also, which has been created, from the father, from his days of South Africa, and of course, further he moved. And of course, his education and a lot of other things, father plays a very important role. Okay. Now, this house is ruled by Surya. So there is an impact which is on the 11th house, all the worldly matters. So what was his role? His role was to ensure that he gets freedom to people through ahimsa, through non-violent means. And what got impacted were all the material things or desires in life. Since he was able to counter and give up on those things and not have very much inclination, or probably he was probably able to control his shad and not deeply think of worldly matters to probably having an impact on himself, which really worked very well for him. So in some cases it works, and in some cases it doesn't work. And of course, I also covered this example in the previous class, and this placement became the primary reason of the freedom fight. And of course, being in Virgo in the 12th house, what other people would expect of him as well. That is also another perspective to see. Third example, and a very important example, is of George Bush Jr., who also has Surya or Sun in Maran Karak. Okay, father's legacy is seen from this placement, as I have already shared with you. And of course, he's taking his father's name. And if you read about him, there's a lot to do with, of course, the family matters and father's matters as well. He also has Jupiter in Maran Karaka. Okay, interestingly, there are two planets and Saturn in Maran Karaka. So a lot of planets, but still, became the president of the US, one of the most developed nations and, of course, the wealthiest nations of the world. He became the president and the most powerful person on earth. But if we understand, firstly, son, which indicates father's legacy. Now, what is impacting here? It is impacting his second house of speech. That is getting impacted, right? Saturn, he would command, and other people who work for him would probably end up suffering or causing the brunt. So that is also how we see Saturn's MKS placement. Now he was very known for his unusual, sense of humor, and of course certain statements that probably he would make, which would rather sound funny, but would sound very conflicting as well, right? He would be sometimes sound to be very harsh. So some of his quotes, for example, he said, "Our enemies are innovative and resourceful, and so are we. They never stop thinking about new ways to harm our country and our people, and neither do we. One of the hardest parts of my job is to connect Iraq to the war on terror. If there were a dictatorship, it would be a heck of a lot easier as long as I am the dictator. He, he, he." He said, "I think war is a dangerous place." And of course, there are lots of quotations and things that he used to probably write, which, became laughable as well at times. And of course, there as well. So one of the statements was, "I think we agree the past is over." So there are a number of statements were probably which you would, see George Bush making, primarily because second house is getting impacted, which is also causing an impact on finance, the economy, because during his tenure, US had a significant economical impact. And this is also the other reason is also because of Mars in the second house, which is the planet of wars. So that being there as well, right? Now Jupiter is in the even sign. When Jupiter is in the even sign, this house is getting impacted, which is the sixth house. All right. So again, conflicts, wars, that is getting impacted. That becomes the center of attention. This is how you again read this transit. Saturn is an even sign. Eighth house is getting impacted. So again, it makes a very good connection with the eighth and two axis. So of course, calling out words, saying something, and of course, not regretting later. So that becomes the weakness there, right? So, of course, a multiple perspective that we could see from this chart is, of course, and then, my point is again bringing that if you have planets in Maran Karaka, it is not totally a bad thing. Even with the ex-president of the US, he had three planets in Maran Karaka. Still, he probably rose to that ranks. Now, there's another concept of saying in astrology that Cancer ascendant, a special rule when Shani is in Lagna, is a Raj Yoga giver. Shani in Cancer, often if placed in Kendra houses, is a very good placement. So that is also primarily related to George Bush's chart, right? And of course, this is the third and the final example that I'd like to share with you today. And once again, as a quick, recap in terms of what we are trying to understand, Karakas, we looked at Karakas, which are the primary significators, Naisargic Karakas and their importance. We looked at Maran Karaka, understanding them, and how it is linked to significators, the primary significators. And of course, one of the most important aspect is remedy. Now, remedy of all these planets will come from here, some or the other way. There cannot be one specific remedy. So, in order to understand the remedy, we would need to understand the placement of the Karaka or the significator. So, for example, when Saturn is in Lagna, the remedy lies with Sun. There's a very beautiful mantra which we say, and I shared this in my previous class as well, which is Om Savitri Surya Narayanaya Nama. I'll repeat Om Savitri Surya Narayanaya Nama. Savitri is the name of Surya. So if we use a mantra here, it helps Saturn move out of MKS or Maran Karak, right? If Moon in the eighth house, then we look up to Saturn. Now that will be dependent on what house or sign Saturn is placed in, and of course, how we could give up or give away matters related to that house. So any of the remedy for Maran Karaka planets will come from the Karaka. If Jupiter is in the third house Maran Karaka, we look up to Mars, how we could get more energy, how we could get more vitality, and how we could probably stay more active all through the day. So, a simple life remedy, which is staying active all through the day, would be helpful in order to ensure that we pull Jupiter out of Maran Karaka. So, this is most important on a closing note in terms of where the remedy comes from.